If you're under 35 and live in the UK, here's my advice. Get the fuck out of this country. Everyone's saying this on social media now, and there's a reason for that. This country is fucked.
One of the interesting things I found from that Liz Truss speech, though, was how she said that there's this kind of disconnect between a bunch of people who live in these countries who want to leave, for example, and the disconnect between that and all these immigrants coming to this country. Now, of course, the immigrants coming from the global south who are a victim of economic and geopolitical policy and interventionist policy from Western states, for example, and the continuing economic imperialism that comes from the colonial past of these countries, for example. But I don't want to focus on that. What I actually want to focus on are people who want to leave the UK. Now, we've all seen the stats. I'm not going to bore everybody by continually going over how we're projected to have even lower growth than the sanction-hit Russia, which is, again, symptomatic of consistently poor economic policy from every single government this country's had for the last 45 years. But again, I'll be banging a drum that I've continually banged on for however many times that I'm sure everyone who's watching this stream is sick of me saying it, right? But the class of people in this country who've been uniquely hit by the cost of living crisis, uniquely hit by falling living standards, they're the first generation of millennials who are going to be poorer than their parents, right? I've talked about the wealth gap between the generations far too much, but it's actually reached breaking point now, where there's no hope for young people in this country. The jobs are bad, the pensions that they are looking forward to are bad, there's no hope, no vocation, and the cost of living crisis has bitten so much that they've been told, having gone through an upbringing which told them if they went to university and if they studied hard and they got a good job, they would be able to have the middle class life that their parents had, and that's been taken away from them due to austerity politics they originally grew up in their formative years when they were supposed to be properly living their best life and ascending the career ladder, for example. They've just stagnated, they've gotten nowhere, and they're at the point where they've reached breaking point. And what's happening now? Young people want to fucking leave. They want to leave. And there's been a real trend on TikTok started by this guy called Ollie Dobson, who talks about mental health, right? There's a series about how the UK in general is bad for your mental health. And yes, it is. Turns out massively falling living standards, like the biggest fall in living standards since records began, will indeed take a toll on your mental health. Mental health is not just a result of poor mental health in general. It's not just a result of bad mental health provision in the NHS, which is of course bad, and we will come on to that later. But also it's a symptomatic of an economic malaise, right? Having a weak economy is going to lead to this kind of stuff. Having a poor standard of living for a country where, as John Byrne Murdoch points out in the Financial Times, a country which is economically a strong country, which has a coterie of incredibly rich people at the top and incredibly poor people at the bottom, and a middle class that's completely declined due to asset capture from the richest people in our society. And if anyone who's watched Gary's Economics channel will tell you that young people, they've had enough. They're fucking leaving. They want to go, they want to leave, they want to go to Australia, they want to go to Denmark, they want to go to Singapore, the Netherlands, Thailand, Vietnam, wherever it may be. They just want to fucking leave. They want to find somewhere that's not rainy, it's not miserable, not full of bellends, and they're going to have some prospects for a future career. Or some prospects for a future level of prosperity that they're not getting from this country right now. So let's take a look at the video that he posted titled "The UK is bad for your mental health." He posted this a few days ago. I actually responded on TikTok, but that will be a story for another time. Let's watch.
If you're under 35 and live in the UK, here's my advice. Get the fuck out of this country. Everyone's saying this on social media now, and there's a reason for that. This country is fucked. And I genuinely can't express how frustrating it is to see my homeland every year go more and more down the shitter. But the reality is, this country is inherently flawed in so many ways, politically, economically and culturally. And it wouldn't be a proper video about Britain if I didn't mention how fucking shit the weather is. We've all started to notice that the weather's getting better, and let's be honest, Britain is great in the summer. But the problem is, this then distracts us from the problems that we have, and it happens every year. We go through this constant cycle of, it's so great in the summer, and then winter comes around again, and it's fucking shit. And the summer doesn't change the fact that this country has a huge problem with stagnating wages, a huge problem with inequality, and a huge problem with the cost of living, all of which we've had for years on end and aren't going to get better anytime soon. Not helped by the fact that for the past 15 years, our country has consistently voted in a political party that stand for inequality and the preservation of elites. The lifestyle here just isn't good for your
I'm gonna critique one bit here and say, no, 45 years of that, mate, right? The biggest increase in inequality in our, so the highest point of inequality in our country, ironically, was under New Labour. People don't like to mention that, but the same people, the same elites who wanted to put New Labour into power, the same ones who supported the Conservative Party in 2010, for example, right? New Labour was a political project of the elites to try and create a controlled neoliberal opposition, but that's a story for, again, probably another story for another time there. But in general, for the last 45 years, we've only had we've had a political system, a neoliberal political system. It's always fucking neoliberalism, as I say every time, that has led to this stagnation in our economy. It led to the financial crisis, it led to austerity, and it led to the cost of living crisis now. And it's only getting worse, and it's going to structurally stay very similar unless we take incredibly radical steps to transform how our society looks.
Mental health. The majority of Brits hate their job, so we spend most of our time doing something we hate and then blow out on the weekend with a load of booze, because our culture apparently is only centred on booze. Oh, and by the way, that booze, like almost everything in the UK, is taxed excessively, except from if you're a major corporation, because obviously they deserve to pay less tax. And there'll be no revolution when the Labour Party eventually get elected, which brings us to the flaw that nobody wants to talk about, our class system. Our society is still inherently caught up on a class system which we inherited from the fucking Normans. A prime example of which we'll see in a month's time when King Charles gets his coronation and half the country go out to kiss his arse, even though the royal family are just a bunch of rich who've held power for centuries on end despite doing nothing to earn that. But apparently that's just how it should be. That's just society. Fuck off. So here's my advice. If you are in a fortunate...
And the class system is a big reason of why we're in the position that we're in. These people who have predominant control over the strings of power, predominant control over the media class, who get to choose and to curate what we see and hear, and have manufactured the consent of a boomer class to continually vote against the interests of young people in this country. Again, I am not blaming them for being driven by their own material interests. I'm a Marxist after all, right? People are always going to tend to support things that are materially beneficial to them in their own material interests, for example. But it's leaving us to this position where young people have been consistently screwed over because they are, but as a function of our poorly managed political and electoral system, disenfranchised in the way people and things that vote. The neoliberal consensus that we've had is the reason why we've had these stagnating wages. It's the reason why they've not grown with productivity. It's the reason why we have this massive gap between the rich and the poor that's led to the cost of living crisis that we do have right now. We are the most unequal country in Europe. We're more unequal than fucking Slovenia at this point. And it's completely unsustainable. And the big irony of all this as well, is anyone sober at any time building? Well, booze makes you worse as well. It makes the country worse. It makes the country worse culturally. It makes every night out fucking miserable. The people who do get drunk doesn't make them feel any better at the end of the day. In fact, it makes them more ill and more worse, less likely to participate in the economy, less likely to be have positive impacts on the culture and go into mental health spirals. Alcohol is poison, and it is addictive, and it ruins people's lives, and that is only compounding the issue you have with just how fucking miserable the country is. And the problem as well with neoliberalism is not just created an economic system that fucks over people, it's created a social system that makes this country miserable to live in, full of grasping simpletons with no concern for the social contract that you would get in a properly functioning society. He's right that one of the biggest sicknesses that we have is a kind of cultural malaise where, as I said, the social contract's completely broken down. It's not nice to live in the UK because people are so awful. People are so, like, the conversations that you have. I mean, look at the kind of rhetoric that we're having in the wake of the refugee crisis and the kind of disgusting shit that comes out of the Conservatives' mouths. The rise of Britain First, for example. The UK is turning very quickly towards authoritarian style politics and social crackdowns, despite the fact that crime is on the downswing, for example. But this is what happens when the economy fails because of the neoliberal consensus. The economy fails, neither party is offering any real solutions to fix the economy on a macroeconomic scale. So they then have to fight over the fact that the failures of economic policy have led to this cultural and social malaise, that they are then forced to take any other way they can of trying to win votes. And they do it through fear, and they do it through motivating people through fear and disgust. It's why we're seeing the social crackdowns on crime, despite the fact that it's not really an issue. It's why we're seeing the crackdowns on trans people, and it's why we're seeing the culture war, and it's why we're seeing these absolute fucking draconian attacks on refugees trying to seek asylum in the UK, for example. And that's not healthy. That's just not a good society. It really isn't.
Enough position to be able to fund yourself and you don't have the responsibilities to look after people, piss off abroad. There's plenty of better countries out there. And yeah, sure, there are global economic problems at the moment and not every culture is perfect. But the thing is, Britain is particularly fucked at the moment and it's not going to get better anytime soon.
And what the thing is, and the other countries are doing better at these with these same problems, for example. Inflation is lower elsewhere. Energy prices are lower elsewhere because of our stupid, overly privatized system. For example, what countries in Europe are dumping sewage into their own fucking rivers? Jesus Christ, right? Why? Like, we are in a uniquely shit position. Like, our water system is more privatized than fucking Chile, right? The cradle of neoliberalism, right? The people who started the whole shebang. We're even more privatized now, and that's why these companies have been basically allowed to dump shit into our own fucking rivers. Our own beaches, right? And they're saying, and the thing is, we can't afford to leave the country because our wages are so low, so we can't actually be in the economic position to be able to get out of the country that we desperately want to fucking leave and get the fuck out of. Not only do we not have the money to move, our ability to be able to move out of the country has now been curtailed because we've left the single market and we've lost freedom of movement and to live and work in other countries in the European Union. So not only have boomers, the boomer vote demographic, obviously overall, I'm not going to get into have people angry in the comments like they were about the Sunday roast when they tried to claim that I said every single boomer was right wing. Obviously, I'm talking about a demographic trend here. Please, I love you, my boomer audience, which is statistically about 40% of you. But please, please, please understand, I'm talking about demographics here. I'm not talking about individuals. I'm talking about demographic trends among voter groups. Right? So they've not only, as a voter demographic, left us with a shitty economic system, for example, but they've also, through being the main driver of the vote in the Brexit referendum, they've also removed our ability to be able to escape it as well. Like, they've taken away our money so that we can't afford to leave, and they've taken away our single market and free movement access so that we can actually have an easy way of being able to move to another and live and work in another country in the European Union visa-free and escape this absolute mess. We've been trapped in this prison by boomers who forced to keep us here. Because the big irony is that if we did move, if all of the young people got up and left, which obviously we're having a problem with population growth in this country already, we keep being told that there's an issue with birth rates. We need to start having more children to be able to fuel economic growth, fuel population increase, to be able to be more working age people to be able to fuel productivity gains and get us out of these economic ruts so that we can have future economic growth. But young people will want to leave the country. And if they did go, who's gonna pay for all the pensions for all the people who were the catalyst for creating the position that we're in at the moment? Right? Who is going to pay for these people's pensions? Because as much as people try and tell you that pensions are something that you earn through participating in society, and then once you've earned that and you've paid into your pension by paying your taxes, for example, the state then remunerates you with your pension through the state pension system. It's not how it works. It's never how it worked. Pensions are paid through public money now, right? And if you believe that taxpayers fund the government, if you believe in that macroeconomic worldview, then you must therefore understand that the public money that's paying the pensioners now is the current public's money, right? It's not money that you've paid into a pot to then get remunerated by the state pension. You need working age people working in your country to make sure that the economy is in the position to be able to fund your state pension. If all the young people just fucking up and leave, your pensions are fucked. You'll have no triple lock. You'll be in a position where we're back where we were with what's happening in France, but even worse, people are retiring at 70 because the government aren't going to be able to have the actual funding on hand to be able to continue having this overinflated state pension, for example, on top of the defined benefit pensions that boomers got, that we are now paying for as millennials by having really shit defined contribution schemes, because private companies and also the state cannot afford to give young people the incredibly lucrative final salary and defined benefit schemes that were given to boomers at the time. So if we all up and leave, what the fuck's going to happen? Like, literally, there are people like this is a unique problem in Ireland since the result of the housing. Ireland has an incredibly bad housing crisis at the moment, which got exacerbated by removal of an eviction ban at the start of this month. And there are huge amounts of people who are going to be homeless, and they're just emigrating. Young people are leaving Ireland in droves as well, and housing is a big driver of both of these things, both in the UK and in Ireland, although there are more problems outside of the housing market in the UK, whereas the problem in Ireland is worse specifically with housing. That's why Sinn Féin are doing really well in the polls, and mashallah. But the country is going to stagnate even further, and this is a vicious spiral, as we'll see when we talk about the junior doctors later on as well. There's this vicious circle where lack of investment from the last 13 or 45 years has compounded into further problems now, right? Where a lack of investment in the younger generation's future has created the kind of death spiral that's kind of precipitated further economic losses, which means that people are more likely to leave, which means further economic losses, and the whole thing fucking collapses in on itself. So, yeah, absolutely. Well, he's now going to give us some ideas of where he thinks people should move to, so let's have a listen in.
Get one shot at life. When you're on your deathbed, are you really going to look back and think, oh God, I'm so glad that I spent 60 years of my life under the shitty grey clouds of Britain, working in a job that I resent, so that I could save up enough money to buy a new build outside Milton Keynes by the time I was 40. So yeah, land of hope and glory my arse, and if you agree, drop me a follow.
So actually, I don't think he was going to mention that. He did a second TikTok about places that he would think to move to. Where is it? There you go. If
you're sick of living in the UK, here are 5 other countries that you could move to. And before people start commenting going, oh, every country's got its problems, the grass is greener. Yes, I know they do. Number 1, Australia, the land of these. There's a reason that almost every...
Jeremy Corbyn is our world's Emmanuel Goldstein. Well, that's the biggest irony as well, is that imagine after all of these years of stagnation, after all of these years of never having your interests heard, having literally riots in the streets over every single provision that young people would have in the country stripped away for the sake of electoral expediency for the Conservative Party, and then finally having a movement behind you as young people in general to try and re-energize the economy, re-energize the country, make the country fairer, make the country greater, make the country into a position where the gains of the economy are not just held by an incredibly small and shrinking minority of the super rich who drizzle the remainder of the economic gains onto a perpetually pandered to class of over-rich and asset-rich boomers, for example. And you then, as a political movement, you create... Jeremy Corbyn happens in 2017. And in 2017, this nascent political movement exists, and then everyone gets told you're a trot, you're a crank, you're an anti-Semite, you're an activist, you're a student, you don't know what you're talking about, you don't know about politics, and then the media machine ruthlessly crushes your movement, tells you that you should never hope for anything better, and you're an idiot for even thinking that you should try, right? And then the press hounds you so badly that that you do not do very well at the next election, which is the not even about your politics specifically, but about Brexit anyway. But that's obviously something that affects you too. But I digress. And then afterwards, 3 years down the line, 5 years down the line, like we're seeing right now, right? Suddenly journalists have kind of turned tack on this one and gone, what we're going to do for young people? How are young people going to buy houses? How are people going to afford to live? What job opportunities exist for young people? Like, we fucking told you! We told you in 2017. We had this gigantic youth movement and we were told that we were too young and too idiotic to be participating in politics. And now, the Corbynistas of 2017, we're all in our fucking 30s. We were fucking right. We fucking told you. And you got what you wanted. And you've ruined the country. And we're all going to leave. If we can afford to, obviously. That is one of the big drivers, the big caveats to all of this, is we actually need to be able to afford to leave in the first place, which a lot of us can't do because we're so poor. And I'm sorry, but it's incredibly frustrating. So that journalists are paying us lip service now when we were screaming, we were pleading with the political class in this country to listen to our concerns, so much so that we that we have the most left-wing opposition to neoliberal politics since Michael Foot. And we were told, no, you can't have that. You're not allowed that. Computer says fucking no. And then 5 years down the line, it's like, oh, well, what's the young people going to do? It's like, we fucking told you. And now, yeah, we just need to just leave, get out. Just, no, there's no reason to stay here. I would fucking leave if I could afford to. I'd go. I wouldn't be here anymore.
Every Brit that moves to Australia stays out there, or the people that travel there reminisce it for the rest of their lives. Australia is a warmer country. The people are really laid back. The wages are double what you get here. And yes, it is an expensive country and their housing market is fucked too. But all in all, your standard of living is going to be way higher and the wages do compensate significantly more than what you get in Britain. Also, the cost of rent depends on where you're living. If you're in Sydney and Melbourne, it's obviously going to be really expensive, but some of the other cities are cheaper. I lived there for a year and a half and I want to go back as soon as I possibly can. Number 2, New Zealand. New Zealand also...
It's also nice that Australia, basically the Conservative Party or the Liberal Party, because Conservatives are Liberals, we always forget this, literally Conservatives are Liberals, but the LNP are going to be out of power for decades to come because they fucked up their own electoral strategy and they're only getting worse because they elected literally elected Voldemort to be the leader of their party. So you can have, not actual Social Democrats, but a less shitty party in power for a very long time. Hopefully that'll change things. But he is right, the housing market is fucked too, because they have negative gearing, which is an even more stupid thing than another pro-landlord policy that Labour promised to scrap in the last election, but then changed tack on this time round.
Has a higher relative standard of living than the UK. Its wages are better than here, but they're not as high as, say, Australia. But all in all, the people and the lifestyle compensates for it. And if you have the right skills, they are looking for people right now. Number 3, and the last of the English-speaking countries, Canada. There's a reason that...
He's wrong. Don't move to Canada. Pierre Poilievre is going to be in power next time, and Justin Trudeau is going to go, and they're going to privatise the healthcare system. The health system is literally going to get privatised in Canada. It's not looking good for that country. So no, I would not recommend Canada.
Out of the top 10 most livable cities in the world, 3 of them are in Canada. Canada is a progressive country with a good healthcare system, good and diverse opportunities, and laid-back people. Yes, Canada has its problem with food prices and housing prices too, but it's still more affordable and got better opportunities than the UK. Just bear in mind that the Canadians don't know how to take the piss or understand sarcasm, and it does get very cold in the winter. But like a developed nation should.
Who else has public healthcare? Most European countries. Although ironically, New Zealand doesn't really have the same kind of single payer system than we do. Thanks to the greatest Prime Minister in Australian history, Gough Whitlam, there is Medicare and Medicaid type stuff in, I think just call it Medicare in Australia. Your friend who lives in Canada hasn't got a good word to say about it. Yeah, Canada is not in a great position and it's going to get worse because Trudeau is not surviving another term and Poilievre has social media following, and I think he's young and talented and well spoken. I think he's got enough clout to be able to win the next election, despite the fact he's an absolute fucking ghoul. And Jagmeet Singh is an absolute chad. But never trust the Anglosphere to do the right thing.
They actually have the infrastructure to prepare for the snow. Number 4, and back to Europe, Germany. A lot of Brits don't realise that the Germans and the British are actually quite similar culturally, but I would say they're almost better in some ways. They have a much better grasp on collective responsibility and looking out for one another. Their healthcare system is good, their infrastructure is good, and their economy is diversified, so there's a lot of different work you can do there. Yes, they are also facing problems with their energy prices, and they do have a bit of an issue with...
Again, one of the biggest problems is the deindustrialisation of the UK. There is no economic diversity and diversification in this country. It's just a massive service economy full of people in fucking baristas and call centres. I would fucking know I'm one of them. So I would not. One of the biggest things I would say is that deindustrialisation is one of the failures of neoliberal economics in this country. One thing I actually agree with Peter Hitchens on. Peter Hitchens made a really good point on Question Time talking about deindustrialisation, which has not just destroyed our economy, but also destroyed our electoral demographics, as I've said about the demographic shift as a result of deindustrialisation of these satellite towns in the north. And Germany has a very, very strong economy.
with social cohesion at the moment, but I would still say all in all it's a better off place to be than the UK, especially if you love the techno nacht club, you know what I mean. Fifth and final, Denmark. Danes are known for being the happiest people in the world. They're an incredibly progressive...
Yeah, they're definitely very progressive unless you're Asian. Right? If you're a Muslim, then suddenly Muslims are not very... Danish people are not particularly progressive to you. But he is correct that Denmark is beautiful. It's amazing. The cities are fantastic. The 5 days I spent in Denmark were the best 5 days ever. I would love to go back. I'd love to live there. But, you know, I wish they were less racist.
Society with a lot of emphasis on egalitarianism. They have great work opportunities, it's clean, great healthcare, and they have a load of freedom as well, and they're all really fucking fit. Main downside is that their weather is worse than ours. You pay a lot of tax, although the state does make up for it with what they give you back. And to English people,
you don't even pay that much less tax that much more tax in Denmark than you do here. Plus, you have gigantic amounts of unionization, like sectoral bargaining. I think it's like 89% union density in Denmark. It's crazy. So the disparity in wages is much lower than it is here.
Well, they can seem a bit rude, but it's not. They're just more upfront. Like I said at the beginning, every country's got its problems. I'm not saying these places are perfect. They're just better than the UK is. And yes, some countries will be out of your budget. I say that as somebody who works in a professional industry, has a side business, and still doesn't earn enough to move abroad themselves. And that is a prime example of why the UK is a shit sack. But yeah, if you found this helpful and you want to hear part 2, drop me a follow.
So yeah, we are trapped in the UK sucks, the economy is fucked, and we're trapped here forever. So that's exactly how the economy works. Isn't that great? I'll finish on a lovely positive note there, folks. And also, please, on your way out, like and subscribe and click the bell to get notifications when I go live. And also become a member for 99p and give me the fucking money. Give me money. I need money, right? You know, if you give me more money, I will have money. So what more incentive do you need to become a member? It's only 99p. Go on, click the join button.